Well, a very good afternoon and welcome to a damp but bright Ballinamore in County Leitrim. It is indeed Thursday the 18th, it's just after 1 p.m., and you are watching the Lite Bite Lunch. I'm delighted to be able to welcome this guest to joining us today. We have investigative journalist supremo Paul Connoly. Paul, it's great that you could come along and join us.
Pleasure, Rory. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into chatting about all the wonderful things and the weird and wonderful things you've done, I just want to give a quick update in relation to what's happening with the Micro Business Awards. Yes, indeed, the finals of the Micro Business Awards are getting ever closer, being held on the 15th of October in the Osprey Hotel in Naas. There are still a handful of tickets, and literally only a handful of tickets left, but it's definitely going to be a great night. And again, anyone that wants to vote for a business in the People's Choice Award, all you have to do is drop along to the website irishmicrobusinessawards.ie, go to the enter page, scroll down to the bottom, fill in the entry form there, who's the company that you want to vote for, and what's your email address, and why should this company win the People's Choice Award. So all you need to do is post the message there, send it in, and all the votes are going to be counted on the 31st at the end of the month. So anyone again that wants tickets, just drop an email to microbusinessawards@gmail.com, and we look forward to seeing you all in October. Anyway, back to the main show, Paul. Absolutely delighted that we've managed to get you to find time for you to join us today. Before we get into the nitty gritty of everything we're going to talk about, maybe you just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you've done, etc.
Sure, yeah. So originally from Dublin, living over in the UK now, and have been for nearly 10 years now. 10 years in January. But I am a television presenter and producer, radio presenter and radio producer, and also now, or certainly over the last sort of 4 to 5 years, I've added sort of media training to the resume. So very busy, Rory, but still enjoying it all.
That's great. Well, probably, given the current age of digital media and whatnot, probably what you're best known for is world's toughest prisons.
Yeah.
So that's probably what you're best known for. So maybe, from what I recall, you visited. I think you visited a total of 5 prisons across 4 episodes.
Yeah, that's right. So we went to, as you say, those 5 prisons. 2 of them were in the Philippines, 1 in Honduras, 1 in Poland, and then 1 in Mexico. And the interesting thing about that program is that during the initial pitch, as in when I first sat in with the production company who'd pitched the idea originally to Channel 5 in the UK, Netflix, where it's available now, actually bought it from Channel 5. But the original remit plan, let's say, wasn't to go there in the way that we actually did. The original plan was to interview, the people behind the bars, but to do so in slightly more of an interviewer or journalistic style, and where over the course of the production meetings before we actually got into the thick of the series, we decided, well, hang on a second, it'd be far, far, far more interesting if I actually live as an inmate, because then we can also legitimately call it inside the world's toughest prison, because we would see everything absolutely warts and all. So in the end, for anybody who hasn't seen it, I'm sure plenty of you haven't, and this is Inside the World's Toughest Prison Series 1, which is currently on Netflix. From the moment that I hit the jail itself, let's say, arrived outside the doors, they treated me as best they possibly could, or as closely as they possibly could, exactly like an inmate. So I went through the check-in process. I was allocated a cell. I was put in Mexico, for instance. I was put in, I think, with 31 or 32 other inmates, and there was murderers, rapists, pretty nasty individuals amongst the collective there. So it was very, very real. And I sometimes get asked the question, what parts of it were engineered, and was it really as dangerous as it looked? And the answers to all of those questions are yes and more. Yes and more.
Well, I mean, obviously, for a lot of stuff has been edited. I just want to apologize to anyone listening on LinkedIn there. We've just had notification that we have audio only on LinkedIn. I will actually post a copy of the video on LinkedIn afterwards. I'm not sure exactly what's happening there, but our technical team here are looking into it, and we'll try and rectify that before the end of the show. But yeah, so like, how much happened that we didn't actually get to see on screen?
Yeah,
was there any time that you genuinely felt? I know on screen there's a couple of times you talked about feeling uncomfortable and that type of thing. But was there any time where you actually felt, this is it, I may not actually walk out of here alive?
Yeah, sure. In reality, probably not. There was one particular moment which I'll talk to you about in a second, but the dynamic was actually fascinating. So I would be known for doing undercover work. A lot of the documentaries, investigative documentaries that I made both in Ireland and in the UK had an undercover component. So a lot of people would have thought I would have went in undercover. That would have been, in the places we were going to go into, just a little bit too dangerous. And insurance companies would never cover you for something like that unless you're broadcasting in the States. And we weren't broadcasting in the States at the time. So the dynamic was really interesting. So all of the inmates actually knew who I was, knew I was coming in, and knew I was filming a documentary, but was going to live as closely as I possibly could as an inmate. So I was a novelty to them. They actually, the vast majority of them, enjoyed the fact that I was there because it was a break from their routine. To have the cameraman or camera woman and I strolling around and interviewing people seemed for them to be a welcome break from the routine. But I was always aware that was temporary. It could turn on a sixpence at any second. And it did a couple of times. I mean, a couple of times once in the Philippines, I realized that one of the inmates, especially one of the inmates, did not like me being around. And the reality of it was that I was alone at nighttime. So I was locked into the cells with the cameraman outside. And whilst we were guaranteed, and these guarantees weren't worth the paper they were written on, to be honest, we were guaranteed that the guards would keep a close eye on me. They too were outside the bars. So if somebody wanted to get to me, they absolutely could. And I spent the night in the Philippines with rats the size of cats scuttling underneath me, thinking that one fella in particular could shank me at any second. Something I didn't see, which is probably the moment that I came closest to something happening, was in Mexico. We didn't pick it up until we reviewed the footage afterwards. Because over one of the nights that I stayed in Mexico, we did what's called a time lapse. And if anybody isn't familiar with that term, essentially, you set a camera running, you turn it off 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours later, and then you speed up the footage. It gives you that really cool lapse effect. And when we did that, we saw that one particular inmate kept coming over to the bed in which I was asleep and sort of standing 2 or 3 inches away from me and staring at me as if he was deciding whether or not to do something. So probably the closest I came to being in serious trouble was a moment I was asleep for, and I'm grateful for that small mercy.
Absolutely. As I said, I mean, it makes remarkable watching. Do you ever, or have you ever tried getting in touch with any of the people you met that you knew would be out by now, or anything like that? Have you ever thought about trying to keep in touch with them or trying to reconnect?
No. I mean, it's a very good question, but no, I haven't. I mean, there were a couple of characters in there that really made a dent on me, really made an impact, an indelible one. There was one chap in the Polish prison called Marek, who had been imprisoned for life because, from memory, he had killed someone with a razor wire, and he had choked them with a razor wire until they were no more. And sitting in a cell with him, with one guard playing chess with him, and possibly one of the most fascinating moments of the series is that, albeit there's no action, albeit there's no pyrotechnics or anything moving especially quickly or dazzlingly, it still was fascinating just to talk to him about what it meant to be a killer, a murderer, and how he felt about being in prison. And he simply explained to me, which I thought was really interesting, and is probably the most succinct summary of the whole series, is that he didn't see himself as a killer. He didn't see himself as a murderer as such. He saw that as a single moment in his life, a flashpoint, which doesn't dictate who he is. So he thought he was like you or I, capable of all sorts of things, empathy, kindness. He was a very intelligent man, clearly very motivated, very driven, had run this, albeit sort of underground illegal business, but had started it from something and it became something of an empire. So had he actually applied his skills to anything that was legal and not in the shadow economy, he probably would have been remarkably successful. So he had all of these things going for him, but chose this slightly darker path. And because he says he fulfilled the potential to kill someone when his life was under threat, which he believes we all have that potential, his life has been decided. He'll be there for the rest of his life behind those bars. And what I thought was most interesting about it was just that he didn't see himself in the way that we did. We pigeonhole people as you are your crime, but he believes he's many, many things beyond the crime. And that's just one small flashpoint, tiny, tiny microcosm of his personality and life that will dictate the rest of his life. And I found that across all of the prisons, that these people don't see themselves as criminals, certainly not career criminals or killers or rapists. They see themselves as people that had a temporary break, a lapse, something. Not to be whimsical by saying those horrible things can be caused by a lapse, but they snapped. And when they came back together, they believe they should have been given a second chance, but some of them won't be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember there was one woman who was actually released while you were there, because she was actually found, although she had been on remand for a long time, she was found to have been totally innocent.
Yes, yeah.
So it's what to somebody like that, how much did it mean? The other thing I wanted to ask you was in relation to that, actually, did the male and female prisoners interact openly, or did you specifically go over to the women's area?
Yeah. So this is one of the prisons in the Philippines, which is smack bang in the middle of Manila, smack bang in the middle of the city. And the prisons that I visited, aside from the one in Poland, probably would be set up and organized differently to how most people would imagine prisons. So the prison in Honduras, for instance, was policed by the National Guard on the outside of the prison, but on the inside of the prison, inside this sort of maze, this networks of rooms and makeshift cells called the Bartolinas, was run by the prisoners themselves, because it was too dangerous for the National Guard to go in there all but once a day when they had to close the cells. In the Philippines, it was, again, they're sort of an open cell policy where they just let everybody roam around. And the thing about the Philippines was that their justice system was so remarkably slow and so remarkably backed up that very often people would be there for 7 or 8 years without even having been to trial. It would be perfectly plainly obvious that they were either completely innocent or they had committed a very small misdemeanor, something that you wouldn't get more than a couple of days in prison for in Western Europe. But 7 or 8 years later, they're still in prison over there. And you're right, one of the women got released. And in the time that she had been there, her own daughter had died. She hadn't been able to go to the funeral. I mean, just these stories, they are absolutely remarkable. So difficult to get your head around. But the culture there is such that they're so familiar with the pace at which things move that there's a level of acceptance that probably we couldn't understand, and they were just patiently waiting to be exonerated and to be cleared and get out of those particular prisons. But there's danger at every turn though with those things. Every prison that I went to, at one point, it would be completely calm, absolutely still, and then something would happen that would just be a fuse. The touch paper would go up and then it becomes very dangerous and very volatile because those are the people that you're in the company of. Anything can happen at any second. So that really added to the tension and the mood of the series, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So as I said, I mean, for anyone who hasn't seen it, I would highly, highly recommend you do, because it really does give you a totally different insight into life around the world. And I think it also shows great courage on your part as a journalist, willing to put yourself into these situations, because as I said, I mean, you having a family at home, has to have been at the back of your mind.
Yeah, yes, very, very much was. I remember, you know, as I said, I've done quite a lot of undercover work, and traditionally, I would not be, or I certainly wouldn't have regarded myself as a particularly brave chap. But for whatever reason, when these opportunities came up, and the reason that these opportunities came up was because I pitched these ideas to stations that I worked for at the time, which was TV3 at the time, which is now Virgin Media One, and my old boss, Ben Frau, and his number two, Fintan Maguire. I had actually gone for a screen test for The Apprentice. The Apprentice, You're Fired, which Anton Savage, a terrific presenter, eventually got. Now, I was very green around the gills. I didn't quite know what I was doing back then, but they contacted me after the screen test, which I'd done for Shinna Will, Larry Bass, and that crowd, lovely bunch of folk. And they said, look, we really like you. This wasn't quite perfect for you. Do you have any other ideas? Or if you don't, we're looking for someone to do an investigative strand on the station. I hadn't done investigations previous to that. I was a journalist, so I'd done all sorts of things. I then pitched them ideas where I would be going undercover, partly not thinking it would actually ever happen. And they really liked them. And all of a sudden, then there was a series on the air on TV3 called Paul Connoly Investigates. And we were doing undercover work, and I found myself in Poland and Paris and all sorts of things all around the world. It was such an amazing opportunity to get to do these things. But the moments at which the undercover work happened, I did have to ask myself those questions. I did have to say to myself, you are not a particularly brave fellow. What are you doing? And to this day, I can't quite explain it. Curiosity overpowered the sheer recklessness of it, because sometimes it was absolutely reckless. It really, really was. And going into those prisons was just an extension of that, to be honest. It was absolute blind curiosity. I knew I would never get the chance to do something like that. And I'm a devil for watching TV programs and shouting at the telly. For instance, I'd seen lots of other prison programs, and it would really wind me up that they wouldn't take the time to ask real, interesting questions, to really, really, really try to understand these people, not keep it on a superficial level, but really dig deep to understand the mechanics, the nuts and bolts, the granular detail of what makes someone commit these sorts of crimes, and how having their liberty and freedom taken away from them for good impacts someone psychologically. I mean, I was fascinated in that. So albeit, especially in Honduras, there were really, really dangerous moments, some of which I wasn't even a party to or aware of at the time. That curiosity is what got me through the whole thing. And I was forever thinking about my wife, and my daughter wasn't around at that stage, but we were planning on having kids. And I have to admit, when I left to do that series, I wasn't sure I was going to be coming home. And that isn't smart. You know, it's not smart. It isn't. I can't claim that was a smart thing to do, but I did it, and I'm pleased I did it. Would I do it again? Don't know. Don't know.
Well, we do have a comment in there from Maggie Garrity saying, what an amazing idea for a series. So,
thank you, Maggie. That's very kind. Thank you.
Now, along the way, and having made a name for yourself as a little bit of an adventurer in the sense of looking at doing something different. Over the years, you've received some random phone calls asking you about doing some work.
Sure, I sure have.
There was a particular one, if I recall, about going gold hunting.
Yes, absolutely. So part of what I do at the moment is media training. And when I'm talking to anybody about the idea of getting into television presenters, for aspiring TV presenters that I teach or I'm talking to with a view to coming onto one of my courses, is this particular phone call. So there I was, I think, what was it? Oh God, 5 years ago now, probably 4 maybe, sitting in Shepherd's Bush. My wife was away. She was working on Love Island at the time, if memory serves. So my wife works in reality TV. We met back when we were working in TV3, now Virgin Media 1 together. There I was sitting in Shepherd's Bush, 9:30 at night, bored to the back teeth, thinking, what'll I do with myself? Watching bad TV, I'm sure. And phone call comes through and it was my agent. And the agent says, lovely fella, the agent says, how do you fancy going to Peru, then Brazil for 2 months, looking for lost cities of gold? And I thought he was messing. And often as well, you get phone calls, if you have an agent, you get phone calls where they're just putting you forward for something. They don't actually have any particular aspirations or belief that you'll get the gig, but they just put you forward. And I said, oh, yeah, brilliant. Right. Why? What's going on? He said, oh, well, this company in Australia have just come looking to see if you might be interested. And it isn't a casting. They just want you to do it. I mean, what? Okay. All right. Yeah, that sounds good. See what they have to say. So then over the course of a couple of months, I was briefed on what this might be, met all of the staff, final approvals were made, contracts were signed. And then I was actually into this whole territory of becoming an adventurer, I suppose. We had to go into the Amazon deep, really deep into deepest and dangerous, most dangerous Amazon in Peru and Brazil, in search of the cities of Acacor and Acajim, which were said to exist by a chap called Tunca Nanara. A long, long, long story. I would very much encourage anybody who hasn't seen the series. It's an absolute belter to go and have a look. It plays on Sky History at the moment. It was also on Discovery US and Facebook Watch. But yeah, a phone call arrives in the dead of night asking me, did I want to go to Peru and Brazil into the Amazon for 2 to 2.5 months, which, because we didn't have our little one then, I could absolutely do. I mean, what an incredible thing. And working in TV or working in media is one of the very few industries in the world where those types of phone calls come through, Rory. So, yeah. I'm delighted I had myself in the shop window, let's say.
Absolutely. I just want to take a quick step back. We have another question has come in for you.
Sure.
In relation to the razor wire scenario.
Yeah.
Do you feel that in a case like that, people should be given a second chance?
Oh no. I don't. Absolutely not. I mean, even that's what's really. Who asked the question there, Rory? Who was that?
That was Monique was asking that.
Monique, and so the really interesting thing is Monique, right? So you'll sit opposite from this fella, and he is all of the things you would think he couldn't possibly be. It's like sort of gravity in reverse. He is charming. He is charismatic. He's quite funny, clearly intelligent, and very likable. Now, they all sound very counterintuitive, don't they? To describe someone who's capable of murdering someone else with razor wire as very likable is an extraordinarily odd thing. But he is. And his description to me of that being a flashpoint, that being just a microcosm of his life that shouldn't dictate the rest of it, he did what he had to do. That's his belief. And his belief also is that everybody has something like that within them if their life or that of their families is or are threatened. But I personally believe, even having done all of that series and empathized with some of these characters to a degree within reason, that if you're capable of crossing the line to that extent, then there should absolutely be no second chances given. I don't fully agree with or believe that anybody that's capable of doing that fully is aware of who they are or what they're capable of. I'm no psychologist, I'm no psychiatrist, but having met those particular individuals, they do seem to have a kill switch, if you know what I mean. They have something in them that most other people that I met don't. And for that reason, I just don't think they should be let loose in case that switch is flicked again. Yeah.
Time is running away on us. So very quickly, Paul, the question that every guest that comes on the show gets asked: what for you is your perfect light bite lunch?
I'm terrible at eating lunch. I'm terrible at eating breakfast. What I tend to do, my wife always goes mad. I tend just to eat from 7 to 10 o'clock at night. I never eat anything else. But if I was to eat some lunch, It's always hot stuff. So I absolutely love anything boiling hot. Like I have some Carolina Reaper sauce that I put everything on. I smother everything on. So it would be, I mean, I'm lazy. It would be sort of sandwiches, very basic, toasted, and it all comes down to the condiment. It all comes down to the boiling hot, whatever it is, be it Tabasco or some type of pepper from some far-flung part of the world that will make me half blind, can't taste a thing, but for whatever reason, I really enjoy it.
If that's what works for you, absolutely.
There you are. That's it, my friend. Yeah. So
now,
lunch isn't huge for me, but I like a bit of spice.
The broadcast training you do with the Broadcast Institute.
Yeah.
You do a huge amount of work with micro businesses, business owners who are trying to improve their ability to stand up and talk to people. You offer training in broadcasting, those folks who want to get into broadcasting. But you have a fabulous course, a 4-day course coming up in September and October.
Yes, we do indeed. So there's one particular course coming up in October now. All the spaces for the September course are gone. So in October, there's a 4-day TV presenting masterclass. We include some social media presenting in there as well for anybody that might be interested in it. And essentially what the course is and why I've been enjoying it so much is it's for people who either have a taste of presenting. I mean, for instance, someone like yourself, Rory, who's done something along these lines and is doing it extremely well, but wants to know what perhaps you might have to do to take things on it to a national level if you wanted to get onto one of the networks or go international or something like that. And then it's for people who have always wanted to do this type of work, TV presenting, but don't quite know how to go about it. So over the 4 days, essentially what I do, rather than just talking at people, is I prepare them to be employable after the 4 days. And what do you need to be employable as a TV presenter? Well, you need to be comfortable on camera. It's as simple as that. So we break down all of the barriers that people have for themselves. And essentially all I do is turn people into better conversationalists, but they converse with the camera, which is a really hard thing to do if you don't quite know the nuts and bolts of it.
Absolutely agree with you, yes.
It's tricky, but you're essentially just having a conversation. So it's more about subtraction, all of the mental obstacles, than it is about me adding anything. And once I've stripped away all those layers, then I introduce all of the good fun bits like interviewing, advanced interviewing techniques. We do reporting, talkback, which is when you're in studio, generally, if you're in a studio environment, especially live, you'll have someone talking in your ear, which to begin with is the most distracting, bizarre thing that will ever happen to you. But we train people how to keep the conversation whilst there's another voice running in their heads. And then what we do at the end is we produce a show reel for them, because if you want to get a job in TV, you've got to have a show reel that you send to the networks themselves and to production companies as well. So that's what the 4-day masterclass is. Other courses, they're terrific, are really theory-based. I'm not interested too much in theory. I'm interested in telling people how over the last 20 years I have figured out that it should be done. I've done that by making all the mistakes you could possibly make myself. And over the course of those 4 days, we teach people how to not make those mistakes, be themselves on camera, and then go and get that job. And then I help people because obviously enough, I'm very lucky to have contacts both in Ireland and in the UK. So the website, as you said, is the broadcastinstitute.ie. Still places available for the October course and for corporate clients as well. We have all sorts of things, as you mentioned, business clients. If ever you get a media interview and you're blindly terrified and suspicious of journalists, come along to me and we'll figure it out. No problem.
Absolutely. When you talk about the voices in the head, and I have Cheryl in my ear at the moment telling me we're going over on time.
All right.
So just before I let you go, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, Paul, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Sure.
Best way to get in touch with me is through the Broadcast Institute, which is, as we say, a media training and mentorship company based in Ireland and in the UK. But you can reach me at paul@thebroadcastinstitute.ie, paul@thebroadcastinstitute.ie, or if you don't fancy that, go to the website, thebroadcastinstitute.ie, and there is a contact form there. Give me a shout. Even if you're just interested, even if you just want to have a chat in anything to do with public speaking, TV or radio presenting, or corporate media training, no obligation. Come have a chat with me, and if I can help, I always will.
Great. Listen, Paul, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time today. That's all from us for
Pleasure.
this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time when we're going to be joined by Jill Poet from the Organisation of Responsible Businesses. And we look forward to seeing you all at 1 o'clock on the 1st of September. Good afternoon.